DOGE is continuing to plug away, slashing, ripping, and tearing out all the waste, fat, and corruption whenever and wherever they can. This despite all the protests and gnashing of teeth from Democrats and big government defenders, as well as corrupt judges who are attempting to stop them at every turn. And now the USPS, or the United States Postal Service, has formally agreed to start cutting their own waste. The United States Postal Service has agreed to cut 10,000 workers under Postmaster General Luis DeJoy, who has signed an agreement to cut these people over the next 30 days. DeJoy sent a letter to Congress on Thursday informing them of the agreement with DOGE and the General Services Administration, or the GSA. In it, he wrote, fixing a broken organization that had experienced close to $100 billion in losses and was projected to lose another $200 billion without a bankruptcy proceeding is a daunting task. Fixing this heavily legislated and overly regulated organization as massive, important, cherished, misunderstood, and debated as the United States Postal Service with such a broken business model is even more difficult. Now, before you get all excited about this, the reduction will be executed through a voluntary early retirement program, meaning these aren't outright firings, but rather an incentivized exit for eligible workers. And while 10,000 people might seem like a lot, when looking at the company as a whole, this 10,000 people represents just 1.6 of the total workforce for the USPS, which is currently employing around 635,000 people. And this isn't the first round of cuts either, mind you. The agency has already cut 30,000 jobs since 2021 as the bloated company continues to bleed money. For example, last year the USPS lost just under $10 billion. Now, DeJoy is framing this as his next necessary step to continue to tackle the gross inefficiencies within his company that he oversees. And importantly, the voluntary retirement approach makes it appear that the employees being shown the door will likely be higher paid earners with bigger salaries, which means more money that they'll be cutting overall. But what I believe is more important here, though, is that DeJoy is letting Congress know, and he made a point to highlight this in his letter to Congress, that he will be working with DOGE to assist him in fixing the big problems, including dealing with the Postal Regulatory Commission, which oversees the USPS's operation. So what are the potential upsides to all of this? Well, the obvious is going to be the cost saving. The USPS has a chronic problem of deficits. They average somewhere between $5 to $10 billion annually that they lose, and that has to be addressed immediately, like yesterday. So cutting 10,000 workers, especially higher earners, might save the USPS hundreds of millions of dollars in annual wages and benefits and pension obligations. So that's a good start. But if DOGE is able to get broader reforms within the company, that would be a big deal, and it would go a long way in righting this sinking ship. See, by working with DOGE, this will set up, I believe, for more cuts down the road and to just overhaul the business as a whole. The USPS right now is a bloated, wasteful, absurdly out-of-date company that operates like it's 1999 instead of the year 2025. I mean, demand for regular mail just since 2006 has dropped by over 45%, and that's never going to return back to its heyday. And so knowing this, when you look at the workforce of over 630,000 people, that number is also likely far too many people working for the USPS. What they need is a leaner workforce as a whole. And so forcing the USPS to modernize, make them a faster, more efficient company, think automation, fewer redundant roles, and perhaps take a page from Amazon and go for AI-driven logistics. And the USPS should probably shift their focus anyway towards more profitable services like package delivery, which has been booming thanks to e-commerce. The United States Postal Service needs to be reformed. It needs to operate more like its private sector counterparts, Amazon, UPS, and FedEx. However, we do know that there's going to be a lot of fierce opposition to anything that they try to do to fix this antiquated operation. You can expect Democrats to scream like stuck pigs about any changes or reduction in workforce going forward. You can expect to see the usual fear-mongering of catastrophic consequences by Democrats and union bosses. Take that to the bank. The optics of cutting jobs in this quasi-public entity will be used as a way to stoke fear that the long-term goal of the Trump administration will be to privatize the company. And that is a hill that the Democrats will likely fight tooth and nail to die on to keep from happening. It doesn't matter how bad the boondoggle is for the USPS. The Democrat Party wants to keep the status quo the way it is, which then begs the question, why? Let's take a look at a Fox News article on this very subject. It's from Bradford Betts, and it's titled, USPS signs agreement with DOGE, agrees to cut 10,000 workers, broken business model. I'm going to go down to the bottom here. This I found rather interesting. It says, critics of the agreement fear negative effects of the cuts, the agreement being this 10,000 employees seen the door, that it'll be felt across America. Democrat U.S. Representative Gerald Connolly of Virginia, who was sent the letter, said turning over the Postal Service to DOGE would result in it being undermined and privatized. The only thing worse for the Postal Service than DOGE's delivering for America's plan is turning the service over to Elon Musk and DOGE so they can undermine it, privatize it, and then profit off Americans' loss. The capitulation will have catastrophic consequences for all Americans, especially those in rural and hard-to-reach areas who rely on the Postal Service every day to deliver mail, medications, ballots, and more. Reliable mail delivery can't just be reserved for MAGA supporters and Tesla owners. Oh boy. Now, the National Association of Letter Carriers President Brian Renfro said in a statement in response to Thursday's letter that they welcome anyone's help with addressing some of the agency's biggest problems, but stood firmly against any move to privatize the Postal Service. Common sense solutions, boy, that is a term that none of these idiots even know what it means, are what the Postal Service needs, not privatization efforts that will threaten 640,000 postal employees. 7.9 million jobs is tied to our work and the universal service every American relies on daily, he said. The agency previously announced plans to cut its operating costs by more than $3.5 billion annually, and this isn't the first time thousands of employees have been cut. As the service, which has operated as an independent entity since 1970, has struggled to balance the books with the decline of first-class mail, it has fought calls from President Trump and others that it be privatized. And last month, Trump said he may put the USPS under the control of the Department of Commerce in what would be an executive branch takeover. See, the Democrat Party looks at the USPS as many things, but the public face that they put towards the American people in how they view the United States Postal Service is that it must stay the way it is because of so-called equitable access. The Universal Service Obligation, or the USO, mandates delivery to every U.S. address. There's 163 million of them. 6 days a week, no matter how remote or unprofitable. A 2020 Brennan Center report estimated that 20% of rural households would lose reliable mail service under privatization. So that's the public reason that they will use to fight this. But more importantly to the Democrat Party, and perhaps the real reason why they don't want this to change, is the USPS employs 635,000 people, and 85% of them are unions. And these unions are Democrat strongholds. They are allies with the Democratic Party, and they operate a beautiful money laundering scheme that pumps millions and millions of dollars right back into the Democrat coffers each and every election cycle, helping to prop up the party. For example, the USPS unions donated over $10 million into campaigns in 2020 alone. So if the United States Postal Service were ever to experience privatization, you could expect to see all that bloated workforce slashed. For example, a company of this size, if there was a takeover, if it was privatized, you could expect to see somewhere between 1 and 200,000 jobs cut as it slims down to meet a private company model. And equally important, privatization would likely mean the end of the unions. Not to mention that the unions would likely be broken up in such a move, and it would end their collective bargaining power. The Democrat Party relies on labor support, and this is why they protect the USPS so strongly. It is a payback strategy. However, in their weakened state, it is unlikely that the Democrat Party is going to be able to stop the Trump administration from truly changing the United States Postal Service at its core. And if the midterms go badly for the Democrat Party, if they lose even more power, we can expect to see fixes and changes accelerate. Now, in the meantime, these 10,000 employees getting the boot from the USPS is a good start. But there is a long way to go before we see real change in how the United States Postal Service operates.